Okay, we get started?
Yeah.
All right. Would somebody like to, no, I'll open a prayer. Lord, I thank you for gathering us safely tonight, and just ask that you would bring others as well, and that we would seek your will in all we do, and just make your word come alive in our lives, and just point us to you, and that our marriages would also point others to you. We ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen. Welcome to week 5 of what I like to call AW Men's Edition. That's where brand at. Hope you had a good week and a good weekend. Tonight we talk about women's bodies. It's almost exclusively what we talk about tonight, women's bodies. And but before we do that, maybe we want to do a quick check-in on the hands-on learning. Anybody, what was the hands-on learning this week?
One of the, well, there was foot washing, there was, I don't know. Anybody have any feedback on any hands-on learning anytime?
Was last week, was that the brainstorming words? Anybody do the words? Anybody surprised by the words?
Oh yeah, the foot washing was the week before. Okay. That's okay, we have lots to talk about.
Okay, lots of,
We're
okay.
just gonna forge on, we'll just take you guys off the hook.
Okay, so I was gonna let Ruth do this, but she said that, I think she said this last week. She apologized for all women. They are complicated. And I think we could, guys probably all agree to that. They're complicated. But I tell Ruth, I said, I'm glad, because it's like it adds spice when things aren't perfect. It's like it adds spice. It gives me, it's like a challenge, makes me have to work at something. So I wanted to give you a picture of something. But first, before we do that, could somebody read Deuteronomy 24:5? And I think we're going to come back to this a couple times tonight, because it's like sort of the foundation of this lesson. Somebody got it? Deuteronomy 24:5. We may have read this before.
Sword drills. Yeah.
We probably read it before.
24:5. You want me to read it?
Yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
When a man is newly married, he shall not go out with the army or be liable for any other public duty. He shall be free at home 1 year to be happy with his wife whom he has taken.
And some versions say to bring happiness to his wife.
So we take this as it could be a process. God knew this and knew that women were complicated, so he said, give them a year to figure this out. So what kind of, you left. You'll come back. We'll come back to this, but they are complicated, and give it time. Don't give up easily. So what I wanted to show you is, I'm kind of a car guy. So here's this steering wheel from this is actually an Indy car, and it's the message on here I love. New engine, new gearbox, good car, please return. So this is the steering wheel. I don't know if anybody watched the Indy this last weekend. Yeah, I just remember Will Power reaching down and making an adjustment to his sway bar. I think he's going like 200 miles per hour, and he's making an adjustment. Anyways, this is your wife, and Ruth says, I'm a Ferrari, meaning she's capable of so much. And this is sort of what tells me that this steering wheel is complicated, and I could all set it to neutral, and I could go. But if I want to go a certain place or really fast, I got to know what I'm doing here. I got to learn this, and I got to try it and see what happens. I can't set all the things to neutral. I have to have plus and minus. Does that make sense? So there's another button on here we'll talk about later. But this just kind of my reminder that, yeah, something I love is really complicated, and I have to figure it out. It doesn't come with an easy handbook. It takes some practice. That makes sense? So God gives us a year. We're not supposed to do anything. We're supposed to spend a year getting to know our wife and not have any other obligations. So.
And part of the reason, obviously, we vary from day to day simply because of our hormones. And what can feel really good one day can literally hurt the next day. And we don't have control over that. We also vary year to year as far as you try putting your body through having a baby or through menopause or different things like that, and it can literally change how your body works. And so And so don't take things personally when what worked one day doesn't work the next day. Most women love variety, but we're very insecure and we're really timid about asking and about telling you, and sometimes about trying new things. And sometimes, I told this to the women the other day, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm like totally." When we have like awesome sex, the next morning we would feel the most insecure, which probably maybe doesn't make sense to you. But for us, it's like we put ourselves out there, and sex is so vulnerable for us that a lot of times that next morning or the next day, we're filled with insecurities. And so
What can
it
help
has a
them?
huge impact when you guys just say, like just to remind your wife, you know what, you were amazing last night, or your body was amazing last night, and just affirm her. Especially after great sex, which maybe seems different than it would be for you, okay?
And the whole variety thing, think about your closet, the difference in your closet,
Mhm.
between your closet, maybe your shoes, your closet. Your wife likes variety, agree? It's a lot different than your closet, right?
So we're gonna start with just some general statistics to just give you kind of we wanna just kind of give you a feeling of where women are across the board a little bit, okay? So, one of the first statistics is about orgasm during intercourse. So, about a third of women can orgasm during intercourse without any extra stimulation. About a third of women can orgasm during intercourse with some extra stimulation. That might be your hand, it might be her hand, it might be a vibrator. And a third of women may not orgasm during intercourse. I'll give you a whole nother set of statistics. About a third of women can orgasm during intercourse most of the time. But they do it all different ways. Like they're open to all different ways to do that, to make that happen. About a third of women can have an orgasm during intercourse sometimes. Like when the stars align, like they know this can happen, gosh darn it, and so in a lot of ways, I think some of those women are probably in one of the tougher situations because it can get really frustrating when they know it can happen and it doesn't happen every time. Okay. About a third of women may never have an orgasm during intercourse. Right? Maybe that seems a little shocking to you based on what sex is portrayed in media, but that's there's nothing wrong with a husband. There's nothing wrong with a wife if she doesn't orgasm during intercourse. That's the way our body works. And there's nothing in the Bible that says you need to have an orgasm a certain way. Like that's just not biblical. Song of Songs is filled with them enjoying each other all different ways. And so in order for your wife to enjoy sex on a regular basis, you seriously have to think about redefining what sex looks like possibly and opening up this idea of what sex looks like, right?
So the second statistic we want to share is that women whose husbands spent 21 minutes or longer on foreplay, warming up, getting her ready, something like almost 93% of them had an orgasm. So if you spend 21 minutes getting her ready,
Why? And that's not just kissing. That's like 21 minutes of
foreplay.
Yeah.
So time, we have another statistic on time, we'll get to that later. Another thing is, right now, I'll just go to it. Men take 2 minutes to reach orgasm and women take 20 minutes. I think that statistic's more like 20 seconds versus 20 minutes. So,
and that's on an average, right? 20 minutes on an average. So some women may take 40 minutes. Some women may take 10 minutes. Okay, it's all across the board.
so if you spend 21 minutes on foreplay, the chance is much better. Women open to oral sex reach orgasm 81% of the time, which is, we'll get to Ian Kerner's book, She Comes First, and strong proponent of that with really good techniques.
And then the last statistics, and I just want you to just kind of put this in the back of your mind, is that in a survey that was done of women, women who masturbated, they reached orgasm 96% of the time. This, I would say basically 100% of the time, okay? And so to me, that tells me women are capable of enjoying sex on a regular basis. But you have to work at it. You have to expand definitions. There are a lot of things you have to do. But don't buy into this lie that, well, women's bodies weren't created to experience pleasure on a regular basis. They are, right?
I think last week we talked about giving your wife permission to explore and use this masturbation, how it can bring oneness to your marriage. And if you're open about it and you're talking about it and you give your wife permission to do that exploration. That's just simple.
Any questions about any of that? We just kind of want to give you a baseline. Can I do this?
Yes.
Is this okay?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to start by just talking anatomy. And I think one of the things that is really helpful for men is to relate our body to your body, because there are a lot of parallels, right? In the uterus, like early on, like we were the same. And so there are a lot of parallels, and I think that our bodies can be really confusing. It's a bunch of flaps of skins and crevices and who knows what is what, right? So I'm going to relate our body to your body. So, so this is a woman's body, and the clitoris, what you think of as the clitoris, the head of the clitoris, so the little pea-sized nub where the inner lips meet, packed with nerves, 8,000 nerves, twice as many as the head of the penis. And so it's very similar to the head of the penis in that it can become overly sensitive after orgasm. It's typically not a place where like you just, like you wouldn't just stimulate the head of your penis and just stay there. And you wouldn't just start by stimulating the head of your penis, right? And the same is true with a women's clitoris. Like you don't want to just like stay right in that spot and just stay there, okay? The inner lips, the lips that have no hair on them are very similar to the shaft of your penis. Not a whole lot of feeling, but it's really kind of this nice counterbalance between ramping up stimulation and kind of not as much stimulation. Okay, it's kind of this back and forth thing. The bread and butter area as far as ramping up arousal for women is the skin right around the head of the clitoris. Very similar to, like for guys, your ramp up spot usually is the ridge of the penis, okay, where the shaft meets the head. And so it's stimulating that skin around the head of the clitoris where as you become more and more focused, and she becomes more and more aroused, is typically the area that you're gonna settle into, okay? The outer lips, not a whole lot of feeling, but kind of gentle tugging or even spreading of those lips to kind of create tension can feel good. A very, just like a lot of times men like to have the base of their penis held, and sometimes even just like the skin kind of around their pelvic area kind of stroked to kind of create tension and to increase blood circulation. Same thing can be true for women as far as stroking across that mound or just kind of spreading the area to make things feel good, okay? That help you understand a little bit as far as how her body relates to your body, okay? One of the things that they, since they started doing MRI imaging about 20 years ago, they realized that the clitoris is not just made of the pea-sized nub that you can see when you pull back that skin. It actually is a whole system, and including the head, kind of a shaft that goes back towards the body, legs that come down towards the pelvic bones, and glands that encircle the vagina. And the glands in this system actually engorges with almost as much blood as a man's penis, okay? And in order for stimulation to feel good to a woman, she needs to be aroused just like you need to be aroused. She needs to be engorged with blood just like you need to be engorged with blood, Okay, otherwise, like, yeah, I kind of feel good, but it's not gonna really ramp up. Okay? In a man, they started measuring this with MRI imaging, and what they realized was that before you even started engorging with blood, your mind lights up. Okay? Your mind engages and starts thinking about sex. Actually, the same thing is true in women. Before she starts getting engorged with blood, her mind lights up. Okay? That's the power of the mind. That's the importance of her feeling relaxed and connected. That's the importance of speaking words to her to create arousal. It's getting her mind involved. That's the importance of her feeling like sex is a good thing instead of a dirty thing. And so for her to allow herself to think about sex. Okay? Any questions about any of that? Okay. So we're going to focus on basically 3 kinds of orgasms. Mostly because they relate to having an orgasm during intercourse. One of my favorite books actually on orgasms for women, it lists 10 different types of orgasms, meaning stimulating 10, there are 10 different areas that a woman could be stimulated and have an orgasm. Okay, everything from her breasts and nipples to kissing, to women that are paralyzed can create erogenous zone somewhere near the area where they've been paralyzed, right? And I like to tell women, like, don't even limit yourself to those 10. Okay, if your mind is open to possibilities, then your body is open to possibilities. If your mind is not open to possibilities, well, then you're done. Okay, that's the power of the mind. Because women can literally have orgasms just from using their mind. Okay, that's the power of the mind. So we're going to talk about 3. We're going to talk about clitoral orgasms, G-spot, and deep spot. Clitoral orgasms are probably the easiest for women to have, and they are the most clearly defined. They are what I call the roller coaster of orgasm. So there is this incline to like, okay, it is very distinct. It's the orgasm where women would say, well, if you don't know if you've had an orgasm, you haven't had one, okay, because it's usually very clear. Orgasm is a learned response. And so if a wife has never ever touched an area that wants to be touched, it may take her body a while to learn and recognize, oh, that feels good. But as she learns, it recognizes sooner and sooner, and her body responds easier and easier because she kind of expects good things, right? And so, like Jim said earlier, if a woman has never had an orgasm, sometimes taking the pressure off of a husband watching and giving her permission to be able to instantly adjust what feels good and discover what works, that can be a great way for her to figure out what works, and then she can show you. Okay. Just like your body, it is usually working outer to inner. It is usually working less stimulation to more stimulation. When you get to a spot where she is like right at the verge of having an orgasm, the head of her clitoris actually retracts underneath the skin. And a lot of times it can feel like it just all of a sudden disappears and you're thinking, what the heck? And it's at that point where almost all women want you to stay absolutely steady, like clockwork, to the end, to not increase stimulation, to not change stimulation, to not slow down stimulation. And so that might be something that would be a really good conversation, because if your wife will know when she's at that spot, and if you can get her to communicate at that time, like just keep going or whatever she wants to say, and okay, like whatever I was doing, I stay right there, just like clockwork. That I think that's a kind of a key time. Women talk all the time about how, like in an instant, they can lose it. Okay, that's the moment where you need to just stay like clockwork. Okay, so that would be a great thing to create communication about. We talked earlier about this whole concept rubbing versus feeling. I think that's probably the most key concept that I teach as far as physical technique. Your wife absolutely knows the difference between whether you are enjoying it and whether you are feeling her, and if you are just frantically rubbing, trying to get her to finish. Okay.
But you also taught something when that rubbing versus feeling. At the last, you said, okay, now don't take your finger off the skin. Just hold it still and move the skin back.
Right. So a lot of women our skin is very sensitive. And it's like if you put a grain of salt in your eyeball and you blinked, it would hurt. Okay, that's how sensitive our skin is. And so lots of lubrication is a must. And we don't have any lubrication around the clitoris. The lubrication is coming from the vagina. So if you want lubrication, you're going to need to scoop it up from down there. Okay, or use an artificial lubrication. Coconut oil works great. There's lots of lubrications out there. But the other thing is a lot of women are very sensitive to friction. And so a lot of times the movement may start out like there may be some movement like this, but a lot of times she gets to some place where she's just manipulating the skin with her fingers rather than moving across it, right? This is creating friction, and women's bodies can just literally become sore. So one of the things that I think is really helpful, and we talk about this in the women's class, so your wife knows about this. We talk about how sometimes it's easier to communicate things using hands and fingers than like down there. Like your wife can't even see her body, quite honestly, okay? And so it might be that she shows you what feels good to her up here. Like maybe she shows you, like for most women, it's the pads of the fingers, so the first knuckle that they're using. Like it's really flat because you're staying away from all these hangnails or sharp points or anything, right? So it's really flat finger. Some women it's up and down. Some women it's back and forth. Some women it's circling around, right? Every woman is different, but your wife can show you some things here, and she can also show you pressure. She can show you speed, and she can show you right here where it feels a little less maybe awkward, and then you can use your fingers on her, and she can adjust and show you some things here, okay? Any questions about that? For some women, right, one finger is two-pointed stimulation. For some, it's 2 fingers, some it's 3 fingers, some it's the thumb. It's all different. And you gotta figure out what works for her. And she needs to know what works, okay?
There is one corollary to that thing you're talking about, kind of going up the roller coaster, and then the analogy is if you don't stay the course, you can run back down the roller coaster. But it's not like you can't go back up. It takes some time, and you gotta don't give up. Just keep going, keep persistent, and get her back up the roller coaster. But sometimes you may want to do that just to have fun, so to speak. It's a
To
sort of
tease
like,
her.
yeah, it's an amusement park, so you get to have fun doing that. So don't discount that you can take her up the roller coaster and back her down.
And a lot of women spend a lot of time teasing. It's about going around the perimeter and almost touching things, and going around the perimeter and almost touching things, brushing things a little bit, touching a little, and then back to around the perimeter, almost touching things. So it's a lot of teasing. So think about teasing, right? And the other thing is, like, if you get to this place where she's just stuck, like she's making no progress, circle back around and tease her and loosen her up. And it's like if you're standing at the edge of a cliff and you're almost ready to jump off, but you just can't quite do it, right? You're kind of stuck. Sometimes you got to take a step back, you take a deep breath, relax a little bit, and you take another run at it, okay? And so if she's stuck, don't just think, okay, if I just rub here for the next 40 minutes, she's going to get there. No, like she's just going to get sore, okay? And so circle back around, loosen things up, tease her, and have some fun with it, okay? The other thing is, you need to have, in your mind, you need to have a plan as far as, not necessarily like it's all planned out, but that you're taking her somewhere. It's not just like random, not just random movement to, like, if you just random move her enough, that'll get her there. Like you need, at some point, there needs to be some kind of ramping up, okay? Now that can happen a lot of different ways. That can happen maybe with pressure. Sometimes it can happen with speed. Sometimes it can happen with becoming more focused on where the stimulation is. Sometimes it happens through your words, speaking to her, or through eye-to-eye contact and just being intensely connected with her. But at some point, you gotta make, she needs to know that you're, okay, we're going somewhere. It's not just random. It's not like I'm going through the alphabet. No, like, know when you wanna take her somewhere and go for it, okay? Another thing that can be really helpful is it's even how you have your hand on her. So if this is a pelvic bone, right? You know, like if you're trying to stimulate her like this, you're gonna feel like you're all over the place because you are, and your wrist is gonna get tired. But if you just rest your hand on her, right? Then it's just simply like moving fingers, just easy, and you don't get tired. And she kind of feels held through this, right? And it might be even like you place a couple fingers on the outside and you're holding her, you're spreading those outer lips together as she's becoming more excited, right? And you're holding her, okay? But don't be all over the place here. You need to get your hand grounded, okay?
And one last thing you talked about, she gets to the edge and she can't go over. I like to say there's this, back to my analogy, there's a button over here. It's called push to pass. So if you're right at that edge and you know that your wife has something that'll just push her over the edge, you wait until she's at the edge and then you use the push to pass. I see somebody nodding their head. So maybe it's like her nipples or something, or
maybe it's speaking to her, just let go.
Yeah. Right?
Or maybe it's, I don't know. You need to learn her push to pass, right?
But you hold on to that and don't use it until you know she's ready, and then use the push to pass. Because you only get to use it so many times, and you get like 30 seconds, so don't use it too much. That make sense?
Okay, any questions about clitoral orgasms?
How would you encourage when the lights are off, you don't know what's going on, you know, and so you need some light, but you don't want like a flashlight or something weird. Picture a headlight.
Yeah, you know, to have a little bit of light is going to help you. And I would suggest like a little night light. A lot of times is enough light, or hang some Christmas lights that are dim Christmas lights, you know, that are not super bright. Something like that. Candles, I think. Battery operated candles. I'm not against candles, but you just don't, like, you want something that's easy that you can use on a regular basis. And then you need to tell her, like I really want to see you because I want to learn you better. I want to know, you know, I want to be able to see you too. And that, well, hey, here's the thing. Her body, right, is a bunch of flaps of skin and crevices, and it's easy to think that her body doesn't change, but it does change. And her inner lips engorge when she's very close to orgasm. The clitoral head retracts. Sometimes she becomes very flat. Even the color of her inner lips will change, especially if she hasn't had babies yet. And so if she's not open to light and you want light, like maybe just explaining to her why, right? It might be a good idea, but having low light is really nice for her rather than bright light. The other thing, actually, I think I mentioned this last week about the Jewish guys that they were supposed to have sex in the dark always. And they said, because you guys are so visual, right? They said, actually, when we can't see at all, we feel our wife much better than we do. So you need to do it a variety of ways. Don't always do it the same way. And manual stimulation can feel completely different based on the position that she's in. So don't always think the same position, right? There's a huge difference between, you know, it might be that you're kissing and you're using your hands on her, and so you're very connected face to face. It might be that you're more kind of in the spoon position where she's kind of laying up, kind of her back against you, like you're laying on your side a little bit, and your hand is wrapped around the front of her, right? So that it's kind of almost in the position that her hand naturally would be, okay? It might be that she's just wiped out and you just want to treat her, and so you sit up against the headboard and you have her sit between your legs, and you can wrap your hands around her, and she can just lean her head against your shoulder or your chest. Okay. It might be that, you know what, like I want to see everything that's going on, and so let me be faced. Let me watch this time, and that's another different position, right? And so don't always think, like manual stimulation can feel very different based on different positions. Okay. Another great idea is to like have her interweave her hand with yours, as far as just getting cued into what movement feels good, okay? Having her show you, like you can learn a lot if you watch your wife, okay? And it can be very intimate. That takes some confidence. Any other questions about clitoral orgasms? Okay, let's talk about G-spot orgasms. Okay, so this is a cross-section of a woman's body. So this is her front, and this is just the pelvic bone. This is her bladder and urethra, uterus, vagina, rectum, anus. Okay, so the G-spot is on the front wall, the belly side of the vagina, and it's not very far in. I would say it's 3/4 of an inch, maybe an inch, maybe an inch and a half at the most. But the G-spot is not like on the surface of the vagina. It's not nerves on the surface. Like this doesn't do anything for the G-spot. The G-spot responds to like firm stimulation of the pad of a finger, like pressing into it and pulling past it, okay? So what they think is that there's a collection of cells that are kind of between the vagina and the urethra. So it's not on the surface, okay? And that when a woman is highly aroused, right, this is not an area you warm up with. You get her warmed up other ways. And then when she's highly aroused, pulling the pad of a finger past this area can create a G-spot orgasm. Now, there's still a lot of debate about whether there's a G-spot, because you can't take a cadaver and dissect an organ and hold it up and say, this is the G-spot, okay? But I have women in every class when we talk about this, and they're like, yes, there's a G-spot. Now, does every woman have a G-spot? I don't know, because you can't dissect it and prove that every woman has it. But imagine that there's an area deep inside of you that's never been stimulated like it wants to be stimulated. Because most intercourse, thrusting, doesn't stimulate a G-spot like it wants to be stimulated, okay? Imagine that maybe the first few times you stimulate it like it wanted to be stimulated, you kind of go, well, I don't know. And maybe you try again a few times later on, and maybe it kind of starts to wake up, and maybe she says, oh, maybe there's something there, right? And so I think it's an area that maybe we can wake up to. Also, our bodies change, right? As we age, our vagina becomes thinner. Maybe we have better access to the G-spot, okay? Here's the thing that's really interesting about the G-spot. For years, women have been telling people that studied sex that their orgasms during intercourse felt completely different than their orgasms during manual stimulation. And the doctors didn't really believe them. Well, they mapped the nerve system, and it's a completely different nerve system. And women that experience G-spot orgasm will tell you it feels completely different from a clitoral orgasm. Clitoral orgasm is very focused, like you know exactly where it's coming from, and it's almost like this caving in of your body and then this huge release and this radiating out of pleasure. With G-spot orgasm, women will tell you it's this full body experience. I don't exactly know where it's coming from, but it feels good, and at the same time there is this bearing down or pushing out. And a lot of times, if you're stimulating her G-spot and things feel really good and she has an orgasm, like she can push your finger out of there. Okay, so it's a completely different experience. Okay, so I kind of choose to believe women rather than believe somebody that wrote a book. Any questions about G-spot orgasm?
This is a nuts and bolts question.
Yeah.
But if you're working on a G-spot orgasm and your finger gets pushed out of there, how important is it to get back into it? Or is it like an activation energy you just kind of let do other things with it?
It's a good question, of course.
That's a good question. I think you want
It
to.
depends.
I think you want to try. You want to try to not let your finger be pushed out of there. That's the goal. Yeah. Can you go back in? Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Not one size fits all. Sure.
Yeah. Yes.
It could change, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But plenty of lubrication.
Like I said, typically G-spot does not feel good unless she's aroused. Okay. Okay. So
Okay.
last one I'm going to talk about is deep spot. Can I do this real quick
Yeah,
and then you're going to get yours?
Yeah.
Okay. So deep spot is deep inside the vagina, usually on the tummy side, close to the cervix. There's an area that, just like G-spot, responds to firm stimulation. Okay. Sometimes it's on the back wall, but it's usually on the front wall. It's the same nerve system as G-spot. So the orgasms feel very similar. Women that experience deep spot orgasm will tell you that it's like this bam, like this automatic trigger. When you hit the right spot, bam, it goes.
It's like the switch you're searching for.
Okay. The tricky thing with deep spot is that if you hit her cervix, it hurts. Okay. But when she's highly aroused, her uterus actually tips up, the vagina balloons out, and I suspect you kind of have maybe better access to it. So I think deep spot, some people do exploring with fingers with deep spot, but sometimes it's just during deep thrusting towards the end of intercourse.
I have women talk about this, right?
Yep. Same thing. They're like, yep. So, any questions about that? Okay, so those. Okay.
It's like clitoral stimulation, G-spot stimulation, deep spot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're different kinds of orgasms.
So now a little interactive time. We've been talking a lot. It's time for you guys to talk a little about. So first question, are these in your book? Doesn't matter. Does your wife need to have an orgasm? Just.
I guess it's up to her.
Oh, okay, that's question 2.
Oops. I didn't read it.
Well, let's keep talking about that, right?
Yeah. Why would you say you prefer that?
Well, you certainly want her to have pleasure,
Right.
experience, right?
I think she could come back for more, a lot more often.
That's all that.
There are a lot of books out there that would say women don't need to have an orgasm, especially Christian books. Do we have to? Like, can you make us?
Yeah, can you make your wife have an orgasm? No.
No,
Definitely probably
No,
shut it
right.
down.
right? Sorry,
So yeah, it's okay.
you go.
So it's like we talked the other night, like who's responsible if you watch pornography? The viewer. It's not your wife didn't cause you to watch pornography. Yeah, who's responsible to have an orgasm? Your wife. You do the best you can, and you try, but it's ultimately her, right? So you want to bring her pleasure, and I like to say, men want to be the hero. They want to take care of their wife. That's we want to do that. We want to be a man. That's what we're bred to do.
Can I interject?
Yes.
Okay. Here's the deal. If you don't think your wife is capable of experiencing pleasure every time, and she senses that, then like she's gonna buy into that too. And so I think it's important for you guys to realize that your wife is capable of experiencing pleasure on a regular basis. Like she's capable, her body is capable. She has a choice whether she wants to, and you can't make her. But if you don't believe she's even capable, I think it's easy for her to just feel like, well, I don't want you to waste your time. Okay, so even I think your attitude about it makes a difference. You know, like you need to help her believe, like, no, like this is possible. Like we can do this. Trust me. Let me try some things. Okay.
And like we talked about earlier, statistics, 81% of women would reach an orgasm with oral sex. And like 96% of women who masturbate, they can reach orgasm. So it's possible. Does that make sense? Okay. So we talked about who's ultimately responsible, your wife. You can't make her have an orgasm, right? And there's a range of orgasms. We talked about the different range of orgasms, whether it's clitoral orgasm, G-spot orgasm, deep spot, or something else. Words, we talked about words causing your wife to go over the top, or some other erogenous zone that you guys know about. You know what will take her there. So there's a whole range of orgasms.
Well, and orgasms for women can feel very different. Like a clitoral orgasm feels completely different than a G-spot orgasm. And orgasms during intercourse can feel completely different. And I think guys have this range that's like it's all like 8, 7.5, 8, 8.5, 8. Like it's all like right there. Okay? And I think women have this range that's like 1 to 10. Like sometimes it's like off the charts 10, and sometimes it's a bunch of 1s. And you know what? If you're having amazing sex and the two of you are connected and she has a couple of 1s instead of a 10, she probably could care less. So don't think that orgasms always have to be this off the chart experience. Let her define when she's satisfied and when she's good. Because orgasms can look very different for women. Okay.
I covered anything else about that.
So let's just talk a little bit about, okay, so ultimately your wife is responsible whether she enjoys sex, but what is your role on this as a husband? Because I think you have a role too.
I think if you're, okay, so this is gonna be hard to say, because, I mean, that's sometimes better for us, but to be selfless. Like if you can come into the act and be looking out for her more than anything else, it ends up being better for you too. In the end.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
And that
I
could-
mean, it ends up being better for both of you.
Right.
That could look, that could even be like a freebie. You know what that means? To just say, you know, tonight, don't worry about me. I'm just taking care of you tonight.
Any other ideas as far as what's your role on this? What can you do?
I think you have to come prepared, at least learn as much as you can,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just stumbling.
Talked about a game plan.
Going slow and changing things gradually, and trying to expand horizons, but it's not gonna.
Well, I mean, like your
Yeah.
your playground,
The
make it
smallest step
gradually
of
make it
something
larger.
new
Yeah.
And see how it goes.
Yeah, so take baby steps and get her comfortable with more and more different concepts. So so she learns to maybe respond in other ways, but also you kind of expand your repertoire as far as what she's comfortable with and what you know.
I think ultimately she needs to know that you want to and then are enjoying like what you're doing for her. It's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you get a crappy server, like you just know like they really don't want to be there, and,
Yeah.
and it impacts kind of the mood and kind of the setting of it, right?
Right.
But when you get that good server who really cares, it allows you to enjoy the meal then.
Yeah.
And so I feel like if we can all just, if our wives can know, hey, he is doing this because he wants to, because he loves me, I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, and I think, just reassuring her that constantly. Like, no, I love doing it. No, this is not too much time. We got all the time in the world. Just relax, yeah. Or if there's a distraction and she thinks, well, I'm done, like, no.
Go back down.
Let me
come
warm you
back
up again. Give me a chance here.
Yeah, my wife the other night asked me, like, do you enjoy doing that? And I'm like, yes, I do. Like, absolutely, I do. Because she was having some, I think, just
Right,
those feelings of,
yeah, right.
like, is this weird?
Mhm. Yeah. And you may think that she just assumes that you enjoy doing it. She does not. Okay? I mean, and so you need to use your words. And you can speak them without her even having to ask them, even better. Yeah, like, your body's amazing. I love this. I love discovering something new.
Going back to steering wheel picture, what we can do. I think there's an assumption that men don't know what the steering wheel does and women do. And I think one of the points is that a lot of women don't know how to use the steering wheel either.
Right.
And so you've got to help push through that together.
Yeah. Yeah, you may ask your wife, well, I'll do anything you want, just tell me. She has no idea.
But like
She has
we
no
were talking
idea.
about kind of baby steps and talk about what you'd like to try. And have a dialogue beforehand, maybe not at the heat of the moment. Have a little dialogue, kind of preparation. And think, how about this week, we try this, I'd like to,
So, and if you're looking for ideas, like, there are safe websites out there. My website has a bunch of stuff for husbands.
or links to other places also.
How do we do this? So there are safe spots to look around and just get ideas on positions or techniques or things like that. Okay. So let's talk about intercourse. So we talked about 3 types of orgasms, right? Clitoral stimulation, G-spot, and deep spot. So you tell me, does this skin-to-skin movement of the penis through the vagina do anything to create stimulation for a woman? Like, it doesn't. It works great for you guys, but it doesn't do much of anything for most of us. And some of that, so when you're having intercourse, if you want your wife to enjoy it, you need to think about what works for her. So if clitoral stimulation works for her, then you need to adapt intercourse positions to stimulate her clitoris somehow. Okay? Now that can be just adding a hand or adding a vibrator, okay, to create that stimulation. But you can do it during intercourse sometimes too. So I'm going to kind of talk about that. So let's start with women on top. So if she's on top and you're laying down and she wants to stimulate her clitoris, then she's going to tip her hips forward. She's going to ride you low. It's not going to be this in and out thrusting, but it's going to be more this like kind of bump and grind, riding you low with her tip forward. Okay? That's kind of typical position to work for women and for her to take control of that movement. If clitoral stimulation works for her and you're in missionary position, then there's what's called the coital alignment technique. And basically, you get inside of her, and then instead of being up on all fours, you're basically like laying right on top of her. Okay? But you take your head and shift it up a little bit. You shift your whole body up a little bit. What that does is it takes your penis, and since you've shifted your head up, your body up, it wraps the shaft of your penis across her vulva. And then instead of in and out thrusting, it's kind of like her pushing her pelvis against you, you pushing her pelvis against her. It's kind of this bump and grind. It's not unusual for women to have an orgasm actually easier with their legs together than their legs apart. And so one leg at a time, you can shift your legs to the outside. She can shift her legs in the inside so she can kind of stretch them and create tension in her pelvic area. And she's gonna kind of hug your penis even more as you do this kind of bump and grind. Does that make sense? So those are the two typical best ways to stimulate her clitoris during intercourse. So if she responds to G-spot stimulation, she has G-spot orgasms, then if she's on top, then she's gonna get you inside of her, and instead she's gonna sit up, and she's gonna almost even tip back, and she's gonna ride you high, and she's gonna just slowly like push the head of your penis into the front wall of her vagina, riding you high. Kind of wanting to force the head of your penis past that ridge. Does that make sense? Okay. If you're in missionary position and you want your penis to hit her G-spot, then a lot of times women will lift their hips either with a pillow or they'll lift their legs up, put their legs over your shoulder, something like that, to shift her hips up, right? Because then when your penis goes into her, it's gonna push into that front wall. And a lot of times, like a husband will actually kneel in front of her instead of being on all four. So you're pushing into that. For deep spot, a lot of women on top can work really well at the end, with her thrusting hard at the end and trying to find that spot. That's kind of hit and miss. But you need to think of how do you adapt positions to stimulate something on her body that works, okay? The other thing that you need to think of is that even the pace of movement a lot of times is very different for her than for you. And so for a lot of women, like slower movement makes a huge difference versus just like this constant movement, okay? And so getting her to take control of the movement can really help. One of the best pieces of advice that I thought somebody gave was if she's just trying to begin to awaken her body to just enjoy intercourse more, because honestly just hasn't felt like much to her, have her get on top and have her just get you inside of her and just be still for a minute. Like, just be still and try to feel you inside of her and give the two of you time to actually connect before you even start moving. Like, there's all this movement and this is like you totally lose connection, right? So just be still for a minute and then let her take control of the movement and just slowly begin to try to find spots or movement that feels enjoyable, right? It may be very different than what feels enjoyable to you. And quite honestly, right, what I'm talking about, this kind of movement, this kind of bump and grind, or the slowly pressing the G-spot is not going to be real stimulating for you. If you have a hard time lasting as long as you want to, that's helpful. If you get nervous about losing your erection, then you'll probably lose your erection. So just relax and don't get nervous. If you need to get it back, she can help you get it back, okay? But if you start worrying, you'll go downhill.
Cool question for you. This is
Yeah.
slightly personal, but I'm just curious because you talk to a lot of women. So one of the things that I find it super disruptive is if I come out, like it really hurts my wife, like a lot. Like if we're going at it or whatever, and I pop out and then go back in or whatever, that hurts her a lot. Is that typical of like what you hear from women or not really?
I can't say that I've specifically heard about that. I think my guess is that as much as it being about pain, it's about this abrupt change that is almost shocking a little bit and maybe a little scary for her as far as maybe you getting hurt.
Yeah.
And so it's probably shock as much as anything. It's my guess.
Okay.
Before we leave this intercourse discussion,
Yeah.
one last thing is,
I
maybe,
haven't stopped talking about this.
we haven't,
No,
I thought you were done.
no, it's okay. I was asking if there's any questions.
I was just gonna say that if you finish, that doesn't mean sex is over. That means you can continue doing something else. We talked about the different pathways, right? And make sure your wife knows that. It's like, oh, I didn't plan for this, but just know I've got you. Whatever happens, I've got you. And I love doing this.
Yeah, so we talk about this in the women's class specifically. And I think it's really important because there are a lot of sometimes women out there, okay, that have an orgasm during intercourse sometimes, or maybe they're working towards having an orgasm during intercourse. And if your wife is left hanging, that is creating this expectation that she's going to be disappointed, or it's setting her up to start worrying of, am I going to make it this time? And she's sitting there worrying the whole time, am I going to make it? And my guess is you guys are worrying at the same time of, am I going to last long enough? Sometimes it's not about how long you last. Like sometimes you could last 2 hours and it wouldn't matter, besides making her sore. And so don't just think, if I last long enough, if I just move enough, like she'll get there. No, you need to think your wife is so much more in tune to connection. And the two of you actually there enjoying each other, eye to eye, feeling each other during intercourse, and bodies in tune with each other, then it is about just faster and harder. That's not what it's about. And so in order for you to be there, both of you have to get out of worrying. That means she needs to stop worrying about having an orgasm, and you need to stop worrying about how long you're going to last. You need to stop disconnecting, thinking about grandma so that you can last longer. Like you need to be there with her and be aware of what's going on. And who cares if you finish first? Because if you have a plan B, then she can still finish. Now that's a conversation that you need to have outside of the bedroom. You know what? I know sometimes things don't always work during intercourse for you. And I want you to be able to enjoy sex anyway. And if you're good, like I'm good, but sometimes there might be times when you want to keep going, you don't want to be left hanging. And I want you to be open to that. And so can I just ask you every single time after intercourse, hey, can we keep going? And if you ask her every single time, then it might be, yeah, we can keep going. It might be, no, you know what, that was amazing. I am so good. Or it might be, what's my other option?
Trust.
Yeah, let's have 5 more. So that's I think that's a huge breakthrough in your sex life as far as the two of you enjoying intercourse and making it truly connecting for both of you, whether or not she has an orgasm. It should be connecting. It should be enjoyable. Like it should be amazing. Okay. And I think it makes a big difference. So have a conversation outside of the bedroom about your wife will know it as a plan B. That's what we talk about. Okay. And there are different ways that she can finish afterwards. Like it might be you use your hands on her. It might be, you know what, that night her body is so tricky. She uses her hands and you use her hands on her breast because that night it takes 4 hands instead of 2 hands. You do it together instead of her doing it in secret somewhere because she's been frustrated after 3 times and not orgasming. Okay, but do it together.
And use
Or
your
it might be,
words.
you might be use a vibrator, and on times she doesn't finish, pull out a vibrator, and you do it together. Okay, figure out a way that both of you can thoroughly enjoy connecting your intercourse during intercourse, not worrying. Any other questions about that?
So that's intercourse.
Cat is quad alignment technique. So that's in that missionary position where you shift your body up. Her mind is amazingly powerful, and she needs to believe that pleasure during intercourse is possible. If she can't even imagine that it can be pleasurable, then she's just going to be tuned out. Okay? Sometimes taking small steps is just connecting pleasure with your penis, as far as use your penis to stimulate your clitoris externally. Okay? And do things to just start making it enjoyable and connecting, and regardless of orgasm.
Okay. Oral sex. So I'm basically gonna talk about a book written by Ian Kerner. It's called She Comes First, and it's very literal. He talks about what we talked about earlier about delayed gratification. So you make sure your wife is satisfied, and then you have a delayed gratification. Does that make sense? The book is very secular. He's a very secular writer,
But it's respectful.
but it's
Like it's not like using foul language.
no, but it's secular, and he talks about
Yeah.
partner. Just substitute the word spouse every time you read partner. It's spouse and wife, and he loves being married because he has his wife the same person every night. He loves that. So it's a great book, and what we were talking about earlier about you don't have to go to a website or something. You can buy this book. It's pretty tastefully done. It's got a few illustrations. If you're not comfortable with those, that's sorry. But it's no pictures. It's all illustrations, but it's really detailed. And it's a super book, and it goes into a lot of depth.
Like it's like this detail. Like do this for 5 seconds, then hold still for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Then do this for 3 seconds. Then do this. Like it's very detailed. It's not like, but every woman's different. So
No.
just, you need-
Doesn't
Okay.
say that at all. It says they're all the same. This will work. They're gonna take him with a grain. But he comes up with 3 main things about oral sex, as you might imagine. We kind of talked about this earlier too. That you enjoy it as much as she does, and you want to do this. So don't let her think that you don't enjoy this. Make sure you tell her with your words that you enjoy doing this. Second thing is that she has all the time in the world. Ian Kerner says, when he says, get comfortable because it could take 45 minutes. I think that's a little bit on the long side, but I mean, if you plan on 45 minutes, you're going to be. So he says, get comfortable, don't be uncomfortable, and make sure she knows you're comfortable. Like you're not straining yourself in any way. So one, she has to know that you enjoy it as much as she does, and that she has all the time in the world. And the third thing, is that you love her taste and smell. Love it. You think it's erotic, exotic, whatever you want. Make sure you tell her that she's confident that you believe that.
And those 3 things are probably women's biggest battle with oral sex. I mean, we're constantly sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, is it been too long? And like he's right on with those things. Okay.
And that women are insecure about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And so take away that insecurity. So
What if she thinks that it's just wrong?
Like morally wrong.
okay.
Well, Song of Songs. I would read Song of Songs to her. There are several passages in there that I wouldn't say are necessarily like clear, cut, and dry of this is oral sex, but there are several where you're like, this sure seems like oral sex to me.
When he talks about I've had my honey and my milk, and I've tasted my wine.
Yeah, there's several passages in there, and so that's one thing that
Or
you
thinking
can talk
like-
about.
He's experienced breast milk maybe, and then the wine being the pH of the woman's, I want to say
Vulva.
vulva.
Vagina, yeah. I guess the other thing, I don't know.
But if she's not comfortable with it, that's okay.
Like you
right?
shouldn't force her. But there's nowhere in the Bible that says it's wrong. And actually her body is much cleaner than your mouth is, germs wise. Like you have a lot more bacteria in your mouth than she has in her body. And so even medically, she's much more likely to get something from your mouth than you are to get something from her body.
So it just, I guess it depends on what her, objection is. And
Yeah,
where it comes
I
from,
think
right?
I'd ask her, why do you think it's wrong? You know, Because I don't think there's anything in the Bible that says it.
But we talk-
I suppose some people just take sexual immorality and they just make it into this word of whatever they want to make wrong, right?
And everything that's not sex is wrong.
Right, but when you read those passages about sexual immorality, it's it's always like they're talking about things outside of marriage. They're talking about adultery, and they're talking about like all of those things that are outside of marriage. They're not talking about inside of marriage.
I have a hunch that my wife with oral sex has had some like past like experiences, and that's kind of why it's not her first go-to. Any tips for kind of unpacking that in a sensitive way?
Has your wife taken the women's edition?
No, she's doing it this next fall, so.
Okay.
But I don't
so-
want to wait until then.
I think I would. I think I would just gently try to open up conversation with her about, well, why do you feel? How come you don't enjoy this? Or, and you might even say, you know, are there past experiences that make you feel like this is wrong,
Or you say, even if there are, you know, I want to do this. I don't care about that. So I was going to say in the women's edition, they go through a full baggage where they can talk about that. I remember there's this one couple that we had that the guy talked about. They'd gone through all the baggage, and she went through all her baggage and she got down to a little purse. I kept thinking about a little purse, but that still kind of prevented him from doing some things. And he talked about we had this full playground. God gave us this full playground, and we're kind of staying on the jungle gym, but there's this whole playground. So finally, they talked about the purse, and they just got rid of that baggage. They kind of threw it away, and now the whole playground's theirs. So it's as long as it's a man and a woman, that just the two of them, God says it's okay to learn about each other. Does that help?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Keep it safe, keep it gentle. Don't push.
Only do what she wants to do. Okay, so oral sex is a balance between movement and stillness. And Ruth talked about that in terms of even manual stimulation, about not moving too much. And maybe you guys have heard this. You're moving too fast. You're just moving too fast. Well, that's the same thing here.
Slow down.
Slow down.
Just stop for a minute.
Speed is not the best thing, right? So it's a balance between stillness and movement. We got to watch our time here. And we talked about, somebody just asked about having a light. Well, using your tongue to explore your wife. You can't see what you're doing, but you can figure out where everything is and make a sort of a map with your tongue of everything there, so you know what works, and you can get feedback instantly on what works.
Yeah, I think a lot of husbands can actually feel their wife much better with their mouth than with their hands. Like, I think your hands are pretty coarse. And so for you to explain that to your wife, like I love doing this because I can feel your body so much better than I can other ways. It helps her to kind of make sense of why.
And I think about guys that are mechanic. I'm an engineer. I hit keys on a keyboard. That's all I do. So my hands are pretty clean, but pretty soft. But some guys they do a lot harder work, and their hands get really rough, and they have no choice about it. So that's not going to be an option really. It's going to be a difficult option. Whereas oral sex might be an easier option. Does that make sense? Okay. Ian Kerner goes into all the different intervals. We talked about kind of going up the roller coaster. Well, the same thing with oral sex. You can go up the roller coaster and you can go back down, where you can stimulate certain spots, and then maybe just tease a spot and come back, something like that. That makes sense. Where you don't camp out in the clitoris. You move around all the places. Or like the G spot. You don't stimulate the G spot until she's really aroused. Well, you don't stimulate the clitoris until she's very aroused. So you kind of hold off on that, go other places until she's ready for it. And you'll see when her lips engorge with blood, you'll know that. You won't see it. Sorry, you won't see it. You'll feel it. You'll know when they're engorged with blood and when she's aroused. hold the connection, like we talked about the skin, don't move your finger, just move the skin, same thing with your tongue. Don't lose connection with the skin, stay connected, or she can feel very disconnected, right?
Well, and the other thing that I would say, he talks in the book about the importance of how you hold your wife, right? Oral sex is very vulnerable, right? The most vulnerable thing that your wife will let you do. And so instead of just having a connection, mouth to her vulva, like wrap an arm underneath her bottom and have a hand on top of her. And so that you're in essence kind of holding her and you're connected with her more than just there, okay?
Yep. Okay, and like I said, plan on 45 minutes. So the book, I highly recommend this Ian Kerner's She Comes First. It's really valuable. It's got some great tips and techniques.
Can we skip this and go on to these and then we'll catch this next week?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on oral sex? Okay. I want to talk about female ejaculation real quick. How many people have heard of female ejaculation? Much more common than it used to be. It actually came up, well, historically it's been mentioned quite a few times, but people kind of ignored it. And then they were doing a study with women to try to get them to strengthen their Kegel muscles in order to prevent urinary incontinence. And they were using a biofeedback instrument to measure how strong their muscles were. What they realized was there was this whole group of women that had urinary incontinence, but they already had strong Kegel muscles. So they started talking to them, and it ended up that actually they only experienced urinary incontinence during sex and during G-spot stimulation. And that was the beginning of people actually believing in female ejaculation and believing in that there was a G-spot. So what they think happens, let me get that right there. What they think happens, right, is there are remnants of what they think was kind of like a prostate gland, but they call it the periurethral gland. It's kind of around the urethra. And when a woman is really highly aroused, so this like happens during like extended foreplay, like gourmet sex, not fast food, okay? These glands can start sweating fluid into her urethra. And then sometimes during orgasm, or sometimes before orgasm, or sometimes after orgasm, she can ejaculate. And it can be just a small amount of fluid, or sometimes it's more. It's typically a clear, sweet fluid that doesn't stain the bed. Okay? And sometimes it's a small amount that's hardly noticeable, and sometimes it's more. But I think that it's important for women to be educated about their bodies. I know in an early class, when I was explaining this, one of the women was like, oh, because it had happened really early on in their marriage. And she was so embarrassed that she just kind of like shut herself down. Like we can shut ourselves down from doing things. And so unless your wife is like fully relaxed and willing to let her body just do whatever it wants to do naturally, she'll shut it down, okay? Does every woman ejaculate? No, not necessarily. But it's important for us to be educated about what it is. Women used to have operations to cure urinary incontinence that only happened during sex, okay, literally. But now it's kind of gone to the opposite end of the spectrum now, where female ejaculation is portrayed in pornography of women squirting across the room, and every woman does it. And so now husbands and men are like, well, how do I get you to ejaculate? Okay, so it's almost become this opposite pressure. It's just important to be educated about our bodies. A lot of times it's associated with G-spot stimulation, but not always. Probably because when you have a G-spot orgasm, right, there's this bearing down, kind of this pushing out, and that would probably play into a woman ejaculating. Any questions about that one? Okay, I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about vibrators or toys. I call them toys. Bible doesn't address toys, and so it's a gray area. And so it's something that you need to prayerfully discern. Is it something you're both comfortable with? And is it something that's going to create intimacy between the two of you? Okay? Now, I don't know, but like, if you start using a vibrator and then pretty soon your go-to is to always reach for a vibrator, my guess is a wife might start feeling like, well, doesn't he want to learn something about me or discover something new? Okay? And so I don't think it's the answer for everything. And I also think sex is about a lot more than just physical stimulation, right? It's about connection and about getting to know each other. And so it's important to not just rely on physical stimulation. Vibrators are becoming very mainstream. Probably 50% of women have used them or use them. They're sold everywhere from Walgreens to Target to Amazon to wherever. And they sell because they work. Okay? They work because they provide a stronger stimulation than hands or mouth can. Okay? But if you're relying on a stronger physical stimulation, is it possible you're missing out on other things because you're relying on physical stimulation, right? And so I think that there are instances where a vibrator can be great, and I think there are instances where maybe the two of you say, you know what, maybe we should see if we can discover something without this, okay? So certainly for some women that are aging, or women that are on medications that make orgasms very problematic, things like depression medication, anxiety medication, that stronger stimulation can help a woman enjoy sex even when she wouldn't otherwise, okay? Or for women, yeah, said women aging, right?
Yep. I think the important thing to say is, like, we read that Deuteronomy, that a man should not be have any other obligations than to bring
Happiness.
happiness to his wife. Well, it's like for a year. So I was like, tell newlyweds, like, give it a year. You gotta take a year before you do this. Kind of a guideline.
Yeah.
Can I,
Just see what you can figure out with the two of you, because it's gonna take time, right?
Yep.
One of the main questions with vibrators is, well, if we start using a vibrator, will she stop responding to me? Will she stop responding other ways? One of the main concepts that I believe about sex, whether it's you or whether it's us, is that our bodies are trainable. So if you always do something the same way, that's what your body's going to learn to respond to, okay? And if you want it to learn something new, then it's going to take time, baby steps, to learn something new. So if you never used a vibrator and all of a sudden you start using a vibrator once in a while, but you're still having sex all those different ways, it's probably going to keep responding all those different ways. But if you start using a vibrator and you get used to how quick that is, that 5 minutes is so easy, and pretty soon you're grabbing that vibrator and more, and pretty soon you're using it all the time. Well, that's what her body's going to kind of learn to respond to, and it may kind of forget. The other thing is, if you get used to it only taking 5 minutes because you're using a vibrator, well, you may think she doesn't work anymore other ways, but that's not the case. You've forgotten that it takes 20 minutes, not 5 minutes. Okay. If you've always used a vibrator and you want her to learn something new, I think that people can do that, but it takes time. And so that's going to be probably a gradual progression of using the vibrator less and less. And at some point, maybe saying, you know what, let's just give this up for 3 to 6 months and see what we can do. Okay.
You
So it'll be
always,
a progression.
and you always have plan B to fall back on. I'm not gonna leave you hanging, trust me.
Yeah, so a vibrator can be handy for quickies, like quickies if you have young kids and you guys never have time. Rather than have a quickie where it's only for you, like vibrator might be helpful in that situation. Be helpful for aging, it can be helpful for maybe it could just be something different. It could be giving you a break. So on the Sabbath, you use a vibrator. It's a little easier for everybody.
Whenever the Sabbath occurs.
Yes. Any questions about vibrators?
Last thing.
Multiple orgasms.
Yep.
I don't know what to say about that. I think
Well, you could say, like that roller coaster, you could bring them all the way up to the top, maybe over a little bit, and then they could keep going back and forth on that roller coaster.
yeah, you know, I think we had this idea. Can I draw this? I don't know what I'm drawing.
Try that.
Okay. We have this idea that this is what arousal looks like. This is sometimes what arousal looks like, but it can look like this. It can look like this. It can look like everything that you can imagine. It doesn't always look the same. Okay. But women, I guess one interesting fact is that in that same survey where they surveyed women that masturbated, women often masturbated to multiple orgasms, but rarely had multiple orgasms with a partner. And so, like, that just tells me a couple things. One, maybe women just feel guilty about having more than one orgasm, or taking too much time, or I don't know, maybe it's a process of you getting to know her, or there are a lot of things. I think multiple orgasms are a lot more common in older women. Maybe we're more needy. Maybe the orgasm is less of this like huge thing where we're just like, I'm done, and it's more like messing around. And so multiple is more common. Maybe it's more connected to G-spot orgasm because they're not so like, bam, done.
Okay, hands-on learning this week.
All right, any questions about any of the stuff we talked about tonight? Is this helpful at all?
We'll be around it too for a few minutes. Sharon, by the way.
Just throw out there real quick. I read the She Comes First book maybe a year and a half ago. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
Highly recommended.
Yeah. And as a woman reading it, I am going to tell you that like the concepts are right on as far as getting this idea of instead of always moving, sometimes it's just holding still and waiting for her to move against you, or pausing and let her body kind of wait until it wants something, right? There's a ton of really great concepts in that book. Yeah. Anything else?
Best class yet.
Okay.
Okay, so hands-on learning this week. You're gonna read Song of Songs to your wife, chapter 4. What you thank God for her body in detail from head to toe. He doesn't concentrate on one erogenous zone. He goes from head to toe. Text your wife. This is an easy one. Text your wife each day this week, at least once.
Just to let her know.
Once a
to think
day.
about it.
And then the other one is give your wife a freebie this week.
And then there's an article about the freebie, and I know that's a repeat from the women's class. If you guys, your wife took the women's class, I just think it says a lot. It says a lot about, you know what? Like I enjoy just doing this for you. I think it also helps you to learn, like, what is it like for my wife when she doesn't have an orgasm? Like, can I still enjoy this? Can this still feel connecting? Even when I don't have an orgasm. And the other thing is, when you guys have an orgasm, like a lot of times it's just like, bam, like it's just like the flood of different chemicals that go through your body. And a lot of times you're passing out, you're just kind of it's nothing against you. That's just how things work, right? When you don't have an orgasm, your body is filled with chemicals that are going to want to help to like just make you want to just keep touching your wife and just keep connecting with her and keep like being intimate with her because you haven't had that orgasm. And then when you have an orgasm, it's going to be like off the charts, okay? So there's a lot of good reasons to do that. To give your wife her freebie once in a while to help her believe, you know what? I believe that sex is for you as much as it is for me. So let me just spend some time, just don't even think about me. Let me just focus on you. Let me see what I can discover. Let's have some fun.
Okay. That went fast.
I'll pray. Father God, I just thank you for tonight. I thank you for this group of men and their desire to be amazing lovers. Thank you for how you created their wife's body so unique, so filled with possibilities, God. I pray that you would give them time this week to connect with their wife. That in some way, God, during intercourse or during sex, that they would experience connection with their wife in a different way. And that's through words or just being still or opening their eyes and seeing her, God. And so I just pray that you would give them time to connect. In Jesus' name.
So if you can help by just putting your chairs up against the wall like usual. And Jared, if you could shut down.